What if one person's story could give you the permission to live your own? Today, I have a special guest that is going to tell a story that is truly inspiring. Kristy, the book you wrote takes a tremendous amount of vulnerability. What was it that made you decide to write the story? Was there something you wanted people to get out of it when you started the writing process?
I knew I needed to write the book because of the adventures and because of the people I'd met and the transformation that happened with me personally. It was a book before I knew it was going to be a book. And what I mean by that was, I feel like if a novelist set out to write an adventure, a transformative adventure story, they would have had trouble coming up with what happened in real life and in my life during that year. And so, yeah, there was a point when I just looked back and I said, I have to write a book about this year just because of all the incredible things that happened. So I didn't have in mind something I'd want people to get out of it, but I knew from experience that just from me sharing on social media and me talking to people, that the stories and the things that happen would change people's lives. I just didn't have an idea of how that would happen.
Now, I have been reading your book, The Perfect Unfolding. It is about traveling in an Airstream for 9 years. It is about your adventures, all of the things that went totally wrong. But this podcast episode is really about moving forward and, not knowing what was going to happen, but doing it anyway, just like with the book. Not waiting for things to be perfect, because the book is called The Perfect Unfolding. And so we're going to talk about that. But this book truly resonated with me. Your story resonated with me in that idea of just not knowing what the future is going to look like. And that is scary, but stepping into it anyway. So I want to welcome my listeners to Inspired Travels with Patti. And if you're new here, I want to let people know that I created the podcast and YouTube channel to inspire people to live life fully. And this story totally aligns with my mission of doing this podcast. So let's jump in. My guest, and I'm using a quote, so I'm going to kind of read your bio because it wrote itself. If normal is a way of being, Kristy Halvorsen is not that. In 2017, she sold everything, left her firefighting career, and hit the road in her Airstream trailer. For nearly 9 years, she has migrated with the seasons, often with no idea where she's headed next. In addition to being a nomadic world traveler, she is a mentor, coach, and best-selling author of The Perfect Unfolding, 7 years of life-changing solo adventure, 1 year that broke me open, a vulnerable, deeply human account of what's possible when you live in curiosity and wonder and embrace the unknown and trust life while waking up to the simplicity and freedom available to us all. Welcome to Inspired Travels with Patti, Kristy.
Thank you, Patti. I'm inspired to see where we end up after all this.
I am too. And I just want to let my listeners know there's no big game plan. We're just flowing with this. There's so much here. I have read most of your book and just fell in love with the story and the stories that you tell. And I saw myself in so much of it. And that's what I want to share. So like I said, you talk about travel. You give great tips for traveling in an Airstream, travel in general, traveling to Canada, traveling to Mexico, solo traveling. But today is really about stepping out of your comfort zone, stepping into the unknown. So let's jump in. There is so much here, so we are going to try and stay on track. Let's start with that word that you use over and over again, coddywomple.
Yes.
Did I say it right? Tell us what that means.
So coddiwomple is a made-up word that was born somewhere in the UK a few decades ago. Nobody really knows. It's made up. And so since it's made up, I took it upon myself to redefine it and to give it an official definition that hopefully will be in a dictionary one day. So coddiwompling is traveling without knowing where you're going. And when I first set out in 17, I thought it was just about travel. But the more I coddywompled, the more I realized it has everything to do with every part of life. And in fact, the more we coddywomple, the more we live life and we just follow our inner knowing, something I like to call the tickle of our soul, the more the most amazing things happen and the easier life becomes. And so yeah, the definition one is traveling, pretty much traveling without having a destination in mind, or being open to all possibilities. And then lastly, to stop predicting our future or predicting our journey. So just take one step at a time and let things unfold as they may.
That is so scary a thought, in all honesty. And if we had met 10 years ago, I would have just totally shut down, said you were nuts, and I'm total transparent. Just, there is no way. I was the planner. I needed to know what my future was going to look like. My terminology was, what does this look like? What's the plan? And so the idea of just going out there into the unknown was scary. And I want to address that for people because I think there are a lot of people out there that the unknown is scary and they're not willing to take that step. Fear, let's call it fear. How do you get past that? Have you always been that way?
I think in a way, yes. I just learned at an early age that we can follow our heart. That's what I used to call it back then. So in my early 20s, I made a big career move and I left a really, really well-paying job with a lot of status. And I took a leap into a job that needs a high school education and scared my mother to death. And everybody thought I was nuts. It was not long after graduation and I was kind of teacher's pet in college. So my professors, the people at my job, my family, my friends, I was the only one that thought it was a good idea. But it was such a strong knowing that I jumped and I changed careers and you know, it worked out better than I could have ever imagined. And so I say that was the best decision of my whole life, mainly because it taught me that I can trust my knowing. I can trust what I now call the tickles of my soul. And so from my early 20s, people saw me as different because I would still get scared. I still had fear like other people. But when I really, really knew to do something, when I was really being drawn, I would just take a leap. You know, like in relation to travel, I remember I wanted to go to Mexico and I didn't know that many people. I had just moved. And so I went on Craigslist. This was back when Craigslist wasn't as weird as it is now. But they had a strictly platonic section, which most people were like, do you want to meet and play tennis? And I just wrote on there, looking for a female that's pretty normal and wants to go to Mexico. Who's in? And actually a lady responded. And so I traveled to Mexico with a lady I'd never met before. And it worked out pretty well. Like we weren't BFFs afterwards, but it was great. And it was nice to have a travel buddy. So, you know, that was in my late 20s. So I was always up to doing different things. But yeah, when it comes to like making massive moves in life, I still got nervous. But because of the deep knowing that I know that I can follow my tickles of my soul, I've been more apt to just take that leap.
I'm thinking about what I would have said and what people might be saying. I don't have that deep knowing is what people are probably saying.
Yeah.
Is it just something special to you, or do you feel like people have that knowing? We just need to find a way to tap into it.
That's it. And what's nice is it's there. It's under everything. So we've just been conditioned by school and society and our parents, like no offense to them because they were conditioned in the same way just by the people that came before them. So it's not their fault, but we've all been conditioned to be analytical and to think through things and to create pros and cons lists. And most people live so entirely in their heads. They don't even realize they're living in their heads. But when the noise quiets, when we're just kind of resting and at peace and present, the knowings are there and they're loud. They're not a voice, but they're just like you could just feel it. You just know. So that's my theory. And I feel like it's truth is the knowings are always there. It's just they're covered up with noise most of the time.
And so for me, I think of it as trusting your gut, your intuition. I always want to teach my kids and now my grandkids, like tap into that. When you feel that, and when I say in your gut, and I point to the gut and I say, if you're feeling something, you don't have to analyze it. If it feels strange, if there's a hesitation, listen to it. So I think that's the it part of it. And I do believe we all have it. It is a matter of quieting our minds and allowing and believing that it's there and it exists. Okay. So now I want to talk about you listen to your gut and you take these chances and you're constantly moving into the unknown. But a lot of crazy stuff happened on your journey.
Yes. But isn't it interesting how, and that's why, like I said, your first question was, did you write your book for a reason? I'm like, I wrote it because I couldn't believe what actually happened in real life. But if you notice, it always worked out. I mean, there were really difficult times. There were times where I lost my stuff and just was screaming at no one and nobody. There was a time where I almost died, maybe a couple of those. But in the end, it all worked out. And that's why I named the book The Perfect Unfolding. Because sometimes in the moment, it looks like utter chaos and the end of the world. But if we know we're in the midst of the perfect unfolding, and for some reason, this is all going to make sense at some point in time, we can look back and say, oh, I get it now. Then even in the midst of the chaos or the really, really hard times, there's this silent, like lovely space that we can trust that. And this too is part of the perfect unfolding of everything.
And this is where I so resonated with the book. And some people know my story, some don't. I say someday I'll write a book, and maybe this is my inspiration to start writing. But 3.5 years ago, like life seemed to fall apart, everything. I lost my mother. My husband went into a nursing home. My car broke down. I didn't have a house because we lived in an RV, so I didn't have a house. And then I lost my job. And while you're going through it, it's why is this happening to me? And how horrible is this? And this wasn't what I envisioned for my future. And all of those things that I know I went through. Like poor me, there was some of that. But in the end of it, is there something bigger? Is there something more? Is there, I don't know, bigger plan that now I could look back and things for me still aren't set. They're still not perfect. It's not like everything has quote unquote worked out, but knowing that there is something at the end of it, I think helps go into that unknowing. Now, I don't want anybody to believe while you were going through some of this stuff, and you clearly talk about it in the book, that you weren't scared, that you weren't mad, that you weren't screaming, that you didn't have feelings that, like, why is this happening, or whatever those feelings were. Mm-hmm. But I think the more we go through some of these things, the more we realize that there is something on the other side of it. So
exactly. Yeah.
Definitely resonated, and definitely why I actually sat back and thought about, why do I do this podcast? And, I would say it's to inspire other people, but this is it. And reminding myself of it. And then when I get scared, or when I'm so busy, or when I feel like people aren't listening, people aren't being inspired, because, you write a book, hopefully you'll get that feedback. And I've seen people that have said how they were inspired by the book. With a podcast, you don't always get that. You don't always get the feedback. And it is believing that whatever you choose to do has a purpose, even if you can't see it in the beginning.
Yeah.
So tell us one of those stories where, can you give us one of those stories where you just wanted to throw your hands up and give up? Like, what kept you going?
Any story I pick, there's different versions. But I almost want to answer your question first. What kept me going? It's just because there's nothing else to do but to keep going. No matter what happens. And I feel like that's the whole point of sharing what I share is, even if you don't know, not knowing is an answer. Then you just keep taking one step at a time, or you sit right where you're at, I don't know. The one story that comes to mind is when I don't know if you've made it to that point in the book yet, but I was invited to go on a commercial fishing boat. Mm-hmm. Have you read that part?
Yes.
Yes. So at first I was like, I don't know this guy from anyone. And he was obviously drinking liquor at like 4:30 in the morning. and but he invited me to go on a commercial fishing boat, which I like to describe it as like think Deadliest Catch but with fish. And then he invited me. I was kind of like unsure, and he goes, "Come meet my mom. Let's go have breakfast." So I went and met his mom, and she seems really super cool. And she was a commercial fisherman as well. And she was actually like, "You don't want to go on that boat." Like, ugh. But I got a good feeling that he wasn't going to do anything, wrong with me. And I was really curious because that's what I think guides me is my curiosity. I was really curious, like when in the rest of my life will I ever be invited on a commercial fishing boat? So I went, and it was not, it was not the best experience. The water pump broke, so there was no toilet, no showers, hard to wash your hands, hard to wash dishes. We were eating Spam. It was a cluster. And then they needed another crew member. And so I was just there observing, and they asked me to stay on as a greenhorn. So like the newest crew member, but actually get paid. And he said, "Hey, I need another crew member. Do you want to stay? We're going out to sea for 3 days. We'll split the profits, but you should get at least $4,000, if not more, after 3 days." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that will fund the rest of my travels for this summer." But I said, "You know what? Let me go for a walk," because we were docked. And I went for a walk. And I ask myself, like, what would I do if I knew I couldn't get this wrong? Or if I knew it'd all work out? And in that space, I knew that I didn't want to keep eating Spam and potatoes and be living without running water on a smelly boat with a bunch of guys I don't know for 3 days out in open sea. The only reason I was considering it was because, like, what a paycheck, and it might be a cool experience. But it was mainly that. And in my heart was saying, I want to keep going. I want to go check out Newfoundland. I want to see what I see. I don't want to be stuck on a fishing boat. So I went back and I said, "No, thanks." And he was shocked. But I think that story is a good one because it's nothing dramatic happened, but it's just showing how much I do trust my inner knowing. And I want to always be clean. I don't want to do something for a reason. I want to do something because my heart is like, yes, let's do it. And my heart wasn't yes. My brain was like, that could be interesting and we'll get paid. But I said no, and I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did. So I'm not sure if that was the kind of story you're looking for, but to me, it's proof of that we all know. But how many times in different parts of life, in different scenarios, do we listen to our brain and say, this is going to be a better financial decision, or this might, fill in the blank, somehow help me in the future, instead of trusting our in the moment knowing that says, nah, I'd rather not.
And that's a perfect story. And that was one of the stories that I was listening to. So I'm listening to the audio version. And I was sitting on the edge of my seat thinking, what is going to happen? Because there were times during the book that I thought this is like a movie. So I had to remind myself, this is true. Like, there's no made up stuff in this. No. And so this was one of those situations where I was like, okay, this is where in the movie something goes wrong and she gets captured and is, put in the dungeon, whatever. Yeah. And I had to remind myself, wait, this is a true story. And yeah, the way that you told the stories, and I really felt like I was there with you. Now, while we're talking about trusting our knowing, and I know that I have learned to trust that more and more over the years, what would you say to people that say, yes, but some of the decisions you made were, in their words, big mistakes? How do you address that?
I have an interesting theory. Okay. And that is, there are no mistakes. So it might look like a mistake in the moment. I mean, there's tons of things that look like mistakes, like, God forbid you accidentally run a stop sign and run over someone. Like, that is a big mistake. This is not saying that you have permission to just go out willy-nilly and do whatever you want, not care about other people's feelings. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying even small mistakes, like showing up late for an appointment or saying something you wish you hadn't. To me, like, I'm being lived by life, and so are you and everyone else. And I am not actually in control of what happens. And for some reason, you know, like a quick example, I really hurt my knee bad when I was young. And I was, you know, thought I was invincible and so didn't treat it the right way. And to this day, I can't do things because of my knee. You know, I can't go on long hikes and things I'd really like to do. And my mom's said so many times through the years, she's like, honestly, I hate that you have this problem with your knee, but I really think it saved your life so many times. She's like, I feel like if your knee was perfect, you would have like fallen off a cliff or done something stupid already, you know? So that's like a small example of I trust that everything that happens is a part of the perfect unfolding. And even though there's things that I like say or do and I wish I could take back, I feel that. But all I do actually is I learn from it and I hopefully can do that differently in the future. I don't actually see things as mistakes in the big picture.
And I have to agree with that wholeheartedly. It's
Yeah.
either you do something and you learn from it, you make a new choice. You know, because I don't know that we can go through life not doing the thing that we go back and say, wow, I wish I hadn't done that, or look at it and think, okay, well, that taught me something. I think about, you know, my whole life, and I do think about writing a book. And there are times I think to myself, if I write this book, people are just not going to believe it. And that's not to say my story is worse than somebody else's or better. I think there are things that, you know, people may be able to get from it. But everything that I have gone through in my life has led me to where I am today. And I think it is a place that even 10 years ago I couldn't imagine doing. And that includes doing a podcast, being on stage. I would get on stages, traveled around the world and spoke on stages. It was not something I ever wanted to do. So I don't see those as a mistake. I see those, just like you are saying, as a learning.
Yeah.
In reading the book and choosing to do this episode, I keep going back to how people like you can encourage my listeners and others to keep going even when things get messy, when things don't seem to work out, when people sit there and say, my life is a mess, nothing is going right. What do you say to them? Because again, after reading your book, if you had given up, nobody would have questioned it. If you had just thrown your hands up and given up and crawled it a whole kind of thing,
Yeah.
nobody would have questioned it. They would have been like, yeah, we get it. So
Yeah.
what do you say to people in that respect?
Yeah, that's a good conversation to have because we've all been there, you know, and even though this book is about the most incredible 1 year journey of all the whole time, I there's flashbacks, and so I shared early on how that first year of my journey was awful. I If there was a easy button that I could have pushed and had my old life back, my old job back, my old house back, I would have taken it back in an instant, but I couldn't. And 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 I was sad, I was lonely, I was crying to strangers. It was a mess. But and even good friends were like, "Why don't you just go get an apartment somewhere?" But and I was like, because I wouldn't even know where to get an apartment. There's like nowhere I want to live. I thought I'd find somewhere that I might want to live forever on this journey, and then there's nowhere. Like I felt so helpless and so lost. But the only thing I knew to do, going back to the knowing, is just to continue on until something arose, like an answer arose to what to do. And I'm so glad I trusted that. Actually, in the moment, it felt like there was no other thing other than just to suffer on and let things happen and figure it out. So I did. But I'm so grateful because I had this big aha in February, March of 19. And what's interesting is nothing in my physical life changed. I was still living in the Airstream. I was still wandering around pretty aimlessly. But my big aha was about who I am and how life works. And once that settled, I thought, this is the coolest life ever. And then from that point on, so early 2019 to present, there have been ups and downs, but even the downs have been just like, well, this sucks, but oh well, that's life, you know. But I truly, there's been so often where I've gotten teary eyed and broke down crying because the pure gratefulness of the life I've gotten to live. It is beyond my wildest dreams incredible that I'm actually doing this. As a little kid, I never would have imagined this kind of thing would be possible, much less I would do it. And so my thing for everyone is like, somewhere deep down, there's usually something. And there's also help. I've had, since the book was written and published, I've had the toughest period of my life with losing several significant people, including my mother and just other things that happened. And so it was interesting because I was having to reread my book and I was giving talks and I learned from my own writing. I realized I wrote this book for myself. In this last year, just being reminded of the truth of that we're all in the midst of a perfect unfolding and that life has ups and downs and we're not in control. We're just on this wild ride. Like that got me through this really, really tough period. And so to me, that's all there is to do, I don't want anyone to believe me. I ask that people kind of run an experiment for yourself. And that's an experiment around listening to those knowings, your gut, your intuition, the tickles of your soul, and seeing what happens when you do. Because I feel like the more we realize that that's where it's at, like life becomes so much more stress-free and clean when we follow that knowing, like the more free we all will be. And yeah, there'll be hard times, but they'll have a different feel to them. And that's it. And I've come through the other side. Like the last 3 months, I've come through that kind of dark night of the soul, and I see life again clearly. And I can see how in that time, that period, how I was struggling sometimes. I was doing what I thought would be best and not listening to my heart. Like I needed to take my own advice.
There is so much in what you said. And I want to go back to the very first things that you said. And that was that horrible first year and how wonderful it was. Because in any situation, we can look at the horrible, but there's always something that we can look at that's, wonderful, a wonderful experience. And I'm not saying just put rose-colored glasses on. Yes, when something happens, when we've both lost our mother, it's sad and it's okay to cry. This isn't, hey, just be happy all the time. But in your worst, that horrible first year, you talk about the fun and the beauty and the things that happened that you enjoyed, and they led you to that next step.
Yes.
I love it's the perfect unfolding. There is no perfect in anything. There is the ups and downs. And one of the things I want to talk about, because what I've learned for myself over the years, stuff happens. And again, when I was younger, when something would happen, I'd say, poor me, why did this happen to me? Like, why me? Why am I being punished? I think a lot of people think that way, and, just sharing here. And now when something happens, that might be something pretty significant, pretty bad, life-changing event, I think I have the ability might not be the right word, but to handle it in a different way, to not feel like this happened to me, to not feel like poor me. It doesn't mean I'm not sad. It doesn't mean I'm not crying. It doesn't mean I don't go into what my coach calls my turtle shell. And that means I've gone into a shell and I am not coming out. Like, this is it. This is the last straw. I am done. And sometimes we need to go in there. Sometimes we need that. But in the end, looking back and saying everything that has happened has taught me something. Mm-hmm. What would you say to people? How do you help people if they're talking about that? I know you're also a coach. What do you say to people?
To be really, really gentle with themselves. To treat yourself like you would treat your own best friend, or like, I even like to think of it as, most people have like a child or a special person in their life that they're just like, I want the best for you in such a way. Like, I hope that you never have a moment of pain, and I want to give you everything that you could possibly, like, we all have a person in our life like that, whether it's our grandmother or kid, or our best friend. But my biggest thing is to treat yourself in the same way, with the same love that you would treat your favorite person, and just be gentle. And I think when we can start being really, really gentle with ourselves, and when I say gentle, I mean no judgment, no expectations, no labels, and as best as we can, let go of all beliefs. When we can do that for ourselves and life in general, life suddenly becomes slower, simpler, easier. It's the judgments and expectations and labels and beliefs that get in the way. And the best wording I can find to help people find that is to be really gentle. And so even if, like, sometimes I'll say, like, just practice extreme abandonment of all judgment. And then someone will be like, oh my gosh, I'm judging myself. And then you're upset. I'm like, well, it's even worse to judge yourself for judging yourself. Like, it's just this extreme gentleness, this radical gentleness. Like, and sometimes my favorite word is, oh, well, or, so this is what's happening today. Because when stuff hits the fan, like, honestly, most of the stress comes from our fighting what's actually happening. And if we can be like, stuff is really hitting the fan today, and I guess that's what's happening, like, just that alone can ease the way we walk about our days. But if we're like, stuff is hitting this fan, and I swear to goodness gracious, and we're all upset about what's going on, we're not going to have the capacity or the presence to see our way out of it. But when we can just say, oh, well, this is what's happening, there's something else that happens there. So I would say that. And then the other truth about life is it is a ride. It is like an ocean. Sometimes it's nice and smooth, and sometimes there's huge waves and whitecaps. But know that there are always nice and smooth days. The ocean never stays how it is right now. So just trusting that this too will be different one day.
That is so incredible. Being gentle with ourselves, talking to ourselves the way we talk to that child or that best friend. I love that advice. And that, we all have those waves. You and I, even with everything we've been through and all that we've learned. And, again, I know you are a coach. There's still those waves. There's still those bottoms. And I think even, on those days where the stuff's hitting the fan, we have to remind ourselves that this too will come to pass. As my father always said, and I never quite understood. And it's true. It will. It doesn't mean you're not in it and it's not horrible. And I know for me, some of the things that have been helpful is having coaches, having friends, having people that I could literally just cry on their shoulder, which is something over the last 2 years, honestly, I've learned how to do. Like, literally to cry. And that is not something I have ever done in my life. Like, it's always been, keep it in, we don't cry. And that's a whole different, road we could go down. But, and again, we didn't talk about your coaching. So talk a little bit about that, because I do think coaching, mentors, therapists, whatever people need, support systems is so incredibly important in going through the journey we call life. Talk about what you do as a coach.
I be with people. That's the best I can say. And the way I work with people professionally, and the way I interact with people that I just meet on random occasions, or my friends and family, has drastically changed over the last 9 years. So when I first started out in coaching, I was your classic coach that help people with their goals and mindset. And I know now that mindset and goals are for the birds. Like, throw them out the window, toss them away. Like, there's no goals in coddiwompling, and if I were to live life and had gone after my goals, I would not be living in this incredibly magical space that I get to call life right now. And feelings are feelings. The best thing we can ever do is feel them all and feel them to the utmost. But no, like, they have no bearing on how we live our life. The problem people has is when they're trying not to feel the feelings, or they're trying to make feelings go away. So one of the things it is just, feelings are like the weather. Thinking that I'm going to have a horrible day just because it's raining outside, like that stinks. So, but and then thinking I can change the weather or that I'm the one that caused the weather, like that's psycho. And if we think we caused our feelings or can change them, like we've got more to see and learn. And so, yeah, it's hard to share exactly what I do because I've had these big ahas in life, but I've found that if we can let go of labels, expectations, beliefs, all that, judgments, life and us will be a happy couple. and I like to call myself a stripper, not the pole dancing kind. But that's what I do in my work now, is I help people let go of and strip down all the things in their way. Because I truly believe at the depths of who we are is all we need. And all the things that sages know about life and who we are, we know them too, once we forget all the things we've been taught and all the conditioning we have. And that's it. So let go of everything and you'll be left with your true, beautiful, wonderful self. And you get to live a life of freedom.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. And I just want to coddiwompling, which is a verb, it's to travel purposely toward an unknown destination. Yep. It's really become your philosophy in life, trusting the journey instead of needing every answer before taking the first step. And I just wanted to re-emphasize that before we close out this episode. How can people get in touch with you? I read this book. I'm almost finished, and I know I'll read it again, and it will be on my list of books to read for recommendations. How can people get in touch with you, see your book, hear your book, all of that stuff? Where can I send them?
Sure. The best place is perfectunfolding.com. And the book is available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook at all the major online retailers and small bookstores here and there as well. You can also request it from your local bookstore. And then another way you can kind of keep track with me and follow me along the journey is my Instagram, which is just my name, which has a funny spelling. So Kristy.Halvorsen, but check the spelling. So those are the two best places.
And I will put all of that in the show notes so people listening do not have to remember. People who are listening on any of the podcast platforms can also watch us on YouTube, where I'm going to put a lot of the cool pictures that you have of your journey in your Airstream. So they will be on YouTube, and all of that will be at Inspired Travels with Patti. Reach out to me, reach out to Kristy, ask your questions. We'd really love to hear your questions, your comments. What else do you want to know? I think this is just the tip of the iceberg for people who are starting to understand that there may be more to life, or there may be another way to live life. And I am telling people right now, if I can get out of my way of the planning and the needing to know what the future is going to hold, if I could do it, anybody can. Because I do, like you say, for the most part, I just trust life and trust the unfolding of it. I just want to thank you so much, Kristy, for being on and sharing so much incredible advice, information, inspiration.
Well, thank you. It's been a joy being with you. And thank you so much.
And I know we're going to stay in touch. And to my audience, thank you so much for listening. I would really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe, the follow, you know what to do. And again, reach out to both of us, either of us, and let us know what your thoughts are.